go ahead and start.
So let's start. So thanks all for joining and not choosing for a non-prepared open space session. So that's good. We're happy about that. First of all, it feels kind of strange to talk about a remote event in real life. And I think for both of us, it's quite a while that we've stand in front of a group like this. Well, we have worked with large groups remotely, but then you don't see everyone this easily, so that's kind of strange. The CEO of YSoft would have been here when the original conference was planned, but also due to COVID and everything going on in the company, he said maybe it's better to do it next year. So hopefully there's a good talk next year about the whole YSoft less transition anyway. So today we're going to talk about remote self-design. My name is Mark. I'm from Co-Learning and I try to help YSoft.
So my name is Georgiy. I'm the coach, engineering coach in YSoft.
Yeah, so we're going to do this talk, and what we're going to do, we're going to explain what we did, what challenges we faced, how we tried to solve that, with some practical facilitation tips that might be applicable to this kind of workshops, but also to other kinds of workshops. And yeah, we thought about how could we make this interactive. So we were figuring, let's do a real-life simulation of a remote workshop, but then you would all mingle. And so we figured, let's do it a little bit differently. So unfortunately, it's a lot of talking from us and some pictures and some slides, but we try to keep some interactive things in there with the challenges, so you hopefully can give some input on that. So. Yeah, so yeah, sure. So we want to do questions in between, so maybe we can use this here. Then just come up and we'll find a time for you to ask your question. So without further ado, I think Georgiy is going to introduce the context, because that's quite interesting or important to understand what we've done. So up to you.
Okay, thank you. And there also would be a longer Q&A session at the end, so if you don't feel immediate need, but you can ask at the end, what things are interesting to you. So for those of you who don't know about YSoft, a little bit of a context. So we started our last journey in 2018, the pre-COVID times, pre-COVID era. So a little bit about the org itself. So at that time, teams were formed about the product components. The product is pretty big. Product knowledge was limited for every team within their components, which is probably not a surprise for you. That's how the org structure, translated also into the product design. So each product component and each team had the dedicated product owner just for that team. So you probably already started getting some ideas, which kind of dysfunctions and behavior that caused. And R&D at that time, when I joined in 2018, was considered to be the bottleneck of the whole organization, the failing part. Over 60% of our efforts in R&D at that time were focused on just trying to maintain the product, keep it running, and the mood in R&D itself was not great. And the great thing is that because of that tough situation, there was the executive support for the change, for the less adoption. So our CEO and the board members actually were really serious about the change, and they promoted the need of the change inside R&D and inside the company. A little bit about the technical excellence, which is an extremely important aspect as well. So the code base is still and was excessively large, over 2 million lines of codes, hundreds of third-party libraries, over 800 build plans, needed to build the product. Each team knew just their part. There was no solid CI pipeline. There was no collective ownership of the code, and there was a big fear of changing anything because of lack of the feedback. So teams actually were afraid to touch any other parts of the code except of their own, because it's gonna fall apart. And a massive amount of legacy code. So during this last journey, from 18 to 20 to recent times, We started with the Flip 1, with the first team forming event. That times, and we're going to talk about that later probably. So that times team formed with in mind the best ideas how they can do it. The increased attention of technical excellence was slowly raised over the last 2 years, so there were a lot of workshops, and thanks for Learning for helping us with that. Event stormings, workshops on refactoring, how to introduce mob sessions, which a lot of teams use it right now and benefit from the learning aspect. So team modeling, the maturity models with engineers, and a lot of lessons learned. So right now we have 13 teams working on this product in the less organization. And remember this number 13 because it's going to be important later with the workshop. So the context for the workshop itself, the workshop of self-organizing teams, is that a company actually changed its strategy, putting the cloud in the first row, and that also changed the product definition. So previously we had the bigger team or group of people working on the cloud direction, and because of this change, actually they became the part of the less group, and that drove the need to change it. Architects and UX were separate groups, the functional orgs, and there was a need actually to change the way how they operate. So there was a strong push to flatten the hierarchy, and one of topics today is about how we right now work without managers. So that also drove the need for the design workshop. And by that time, so we had 20 teams, certain right now, but the sizes of these teams were from 4 to 12 people. So some teams felt they didn't have enough members, and some were really large. Saying this, the workshop itself was originated from the bottom up and top down. So what does it mean? So bottom up, during the first self-design workshop 2 years ago, the teams had in mind the idea that if in each team we maximize skills and the knowledge of all the parts of the product, team would become self-sufficient, which actually is one of challenges, and that was not the case. So the experience that teams got during these 2 years of delivering large and complex features actually made them understand that the whole product is too big. So the idea of every team having enough knowledge to contribute to every part of the product didn't work well for them. So they realized that they need to change this approach somehow, but we really didn't know how that time. And Mark is going to talk about that. Because teams were not self-sufficient, so the way how even stories were created or the work on product was organized was very horizontal. So either teams, tend to work on some specific layer, or people from different teams tend to create virtual groups to deliver something end-to-end. From the top-down perspective, so there was a desire from the CEO to uniform team sizes. So that was one of constraints for the further workshop we are going to talk about. So all teams had to take the uniform size. And there was a concern about the decreased productivity because some teams too big, some teams don't have enough members. So that's supposed to be solved by that. And the need of the structural reorganization. So removing these function groups like US and architects, and also changing the structure, so removing the middle management, change it to managerless organization in R&D. And we actually was working with the CEO and leader of the change on that, and refined the optimization goal. So the goal we used with teams during this self-organized workshop was that teams need to come up with their structure that would help them to optimize end-to-end delivery of customer value. So some certain parts of this remote workshop were really focused on the reflection. Are teams able to do this and how to do that? But Mark will right now share more specific, interesting details. So
maybe the product. Can you say a little bit about what the product is?
Product is the print management and scanning solution. So you probably know these big, printers, multifunctional devices in the office. And my first experience with them was in like 10 years ago in my job when they asked me to simply scan some document. And it took me, I think, about 1 hour to figure out how to send it via email, to my inbox. And that was really disappointing. And so what we do, we really simplify the way how people actually interact with that, and we are enabling business, making them smarter. So this product is aimed to optimize cost and improve productivity inside organizations. So we make this company smarter, help them make smarter business. And you obviously can learn more on a site, but Mark, let's get into some interesting details.
Yeah, so thank you, Georgiy. So I think some of these things also raise questions like a uniform team size and things like that. So we're not going to talk about that now, but if you want to know more about that, then let's reflect on that at some other time. So what I want to ask you now, so we're in the situation, top down, bottom up, we want different team designs, 86 people in teams, product owner involved, some managers that were at their last time being a manager there. So workshops with over 90 people. So what do you think are challenges, or what experience did you have in challenges to do this kind of thing fully remote? And take like 2 minutes to write down some things, some challenges you can imagine or that you experienced, so we can reflect whether we have actually the same challenges as you think we should have.
And maybe as additional context, so workshop happened at the beginning of the May. So that was the time where all these things probably just were like really ramping up.
Okay, so this is actually a technique that we use a lot. So complete silence, everyone individual, give their input. So we're going to use these challenges in a moment, but I will briefly summarize high level what we did in the workshops. And for the challenges, we will pick some specific things out to dive deeper into, but that you have some context. So this is actually, if I'm close enough, this is actually how our Miro board looked like. So what we did was we did it fully in Miro together with Zoom and breakout rooms. That were the main technologies that we used. So this is what it looked like after workshop 1. We did 2 workshops, and I will explain why we did that in a moment. So unfortunately, this isn't working. So what we started with is like opening, making sure everyone understood what we're doing. The responsibility process that most teams knew, so we repeated that so they understood what their responsibility is and how they would think about it and how they could make discussions. Then what we did was we looked back at what challenges did you encounter. So Georgiy mentioned we did a bottom-up. People wanted to change teams and had some challenges, so we figured we can now change teams, but if we don't deal with the challenges, we can do that again in half a year when product backlog has changed. So we want to prevent that. So first we identified the challenges so they could take that input for their team designs. Then we did a part that we don't dive deeply into. Again, we can discuss that later, but teams had to figure out together what their fixed team size would be, which became 7, so each team should be 7 people. And after that, we started iterating. So basically, we gave people a time box, the question, who will be in your team? Make that visual on the board, go to a breakout room, discuss with each other. At the end of the session, make sure that everything is noted down on the board. Then we gave everyone time to read the other outcomes, and if needed, ask questions. This is not clear or that is not clear. Basically, this is something we repeated. In this first workshop, because the optimization goal was to deliver customer value end-to-end within a team, which doesn't mean they need to do everything, but the things they do, they need to be end-to-end. We put here in the middle, you see a lot of these stickies, yellow and green. We put basically the product backlog, put some previous items and some future items there, and ask them, with this team, your draft team right now, are you able to deliver these PBIs end-to-end? That was green, and make it orange if you are willing or able to learn it. Or willing and able, I'm sorry. So to identify and to let them reflect on, are we better able to deliver it end-to-end? So basically, this is the end of the first workshop. Of course, we did some reflection. And in the middle there, you see the green, orange, and red stickies to vote after each round. How happy are we with our current team designs? 1 week later, oh, I forgot one thing. At the end, we defined per team also which actions do you need to solve in between those workshops. So some people weren't there, they need to discuss. 2 people actually didn't have a team after 3 rounds. So there was some work there for both those people and for the head of product. And then we moved on. So then there was 1 week later, was the second workshop, which we basically repeated this. So we started by summarizing what's your current status. Maybe something changed during the week, which actually happened in quite some teams. And then we continued iterating. Then we asked after the 4th round, do we need another round? Or is everybody happy about the current team design? 1 team said no. So we asked, put your blocking concerns on the board. And people that need or are able to help solving this, please go to breakout room, the rest can drink coffee or do anything else, and discuss whatever is needed to discuss. After that, they said, okay, it's good for now with the things that we now discussed, and we move on. And the last thing we did here was identify what needs to be done before next week, when we actually start in a new sprint with the new teams, or in the first sprint, or in the subsequent 2 sprints. And we let them vote what are the main things and what do we need to solve. So this is very high level. So we're going to take aspects of this to dive deeper into. Question. So now we're going to discuss challenges. Oh, good. I see here some big blue square, but it isn't here, so that's good. And I see my my presentation is messed up. So discussing status quo. Everyone that has something like this. So how to deal with your current problems. Does everybody that had that written down as a challenge, please raise it in the air. I see no one. Okay. So what for us was hard to do. Teams were not satisfied with their ability to learn, ability to collaborate because their skills were too diverse to actually work on some product backlog items and deliver them. But for that, we needed to have conversations about what's going wrong right now. So also to deal with technical excellence and complexity, but also with the learning ability of teams, that kind of things. If you were in real life, you were just going to the coffee, going in some room, talk about it, and figure out what it was. But remote, having that kind of discussions is harder. So what some things we did, we tried to make very transparent here, what are the current challenges. So we asked 90 people at the same time, identify the current challenges, then cluster them and categorize. And actually it's zoomed out too much, but we even let them vote on it. So which one are the main things that we need to solve? So this way, this kind of discussions we did. Other thing that we did was have really clear communication about what we're going to do, what we should be doing, what learnings we take from those challenges, both from head of product with communication and Scrum Masters working very close to teams to guide them, help them to identify what needs to be done. Last thing that we did was make really transparent on the board after each iteration what is currently the status, what do you need to improve. So if you would dive more deeply into which we're not going to do now, we put specific questions after each round. So after the first round was more individual focused. After round 3, for example, it was more about how can you help to improve the team of teams instead of your own team only. To make it really specific, what challenges are we solving and are we actually going the right direction?
So if I can add 2 things here. So I didn't mention it before, but we have 3 offices. So engineering teams distributed in 3 locations. And when teams were discussing challenges, it was visible that for each location, guys there are aligned, about problems. But if you take all 3 locations, that the perception about problems is different. So it really helped also to reveal, how different side perceives the problem and share this. And the second one is, because it was in one virtual board, we also encouraged teams to review results of other teams. So they were not only focused on their challenges, but they can learn just in time from others, through this single shared virtual board.
Yep. So the question is a microphone here, so that's probably easier.
How proficient were all the participants already before the workshop in using the tool that you were using? Like, I think this is Miro, right? So,
I'll come back to that in another challenge. So that's a good question, actually. Yeah. So it will actually be the next one. I figured it was this one, but it's another one. So who has something like lack of coffee corner and one-on-one talks as a challenge? 1, 2, 3, I see. 4, great. 5, good. So, or similar ones. So, in our experience, when we do self-designing team workshops, we learned that the breaks between iterations should be long, like 30 minutes or something. Why? Because people assume, maybe I'm going in Georgiy's team, and then I go to the coffee corner, I talk to person over here, my former colleague, which is in another team, says, I'm in this Georgiy guy, what do you think of him? And he might say, that's a terrific guy, he's very good. Or he might say, I wouldn't work with him because of... And then they go back and go to another team. But how do you do that remotely? Because that's not happening. So one thing we did, we made it into 2 workshops very deliberately. Not only because workshops shouldn't be too long remotely, but also because we want to have time in between to people be able to have discussions. That's very important. Further, what we tried to do was make specific, what do you need to do now between the workshops to actually do that? Make it really specific and come back to that in the second workshop. So instead of having it quite open, we make it more fixed than in real life. In real life, it's easier. People are together, but remote, you need to make things transparent and explicit. And what we, for example, also did with some more steps, actually, but this is an example, is make really explicit the next steps that we're going to take. Because that way, we could vote So people could say, okay, this is important, and we could even say who is going to work on this. So we arrange basically the offline talks more, so these talks happen in between. Otherwise, it becomes harder because with COVID, no one was at the office, right? If people would be at the office, it might be easier, but it wasn't. So we tried techniques to basically encourage that there would be some one-on-one talks. And I come back to one other technique in another challenge. Microphone. Well, it's also being recorded, so they can hear it.
No, I wonder about if you observed any significant difference in. I mean, you have one-on-one talks, but it's still over Zoom or something like that. So, and when you're forming the team, you want to kind of get to know each other on a personal level, and which is generally often done. Hey, let's grab a beer or something like that, and in a completely different set. How do you accommodate that?
Yeah, so this is something we didn't do because, like Georgiy said, these teams, most people knew each other. So it would be different. We actually talked about that. So if that wouldn't be the case, we would have had probably some separate event, remote, just with the purpose of getting to know each other, getting to know each other's skills. So we were in a situation that, except for some new people, but most people knew each other. And it was May, so it was like 1.5 months in the lockdown. So it was not that some people joined newly during COVID. It was like almost 4 or 5 months ago. So, so we didn't deal with that, so we didn't experiment, but I could imagine that you need to take time to do that. I certainly agree. Roland.
Hello. Would you agree maybe that Zoom is not the most ideal tool to do this with? I mean, you said we do 2 sessions for people and have time in between to talk, but that's also because of technical limitations, right? Mm-hmm. If Zoom would allow everybody to just click, create a room and get people together to talk for them, you know, that would be easier and you could do more inside of your session. Am I right, or didn't you not?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
It could be easier, but we actually, bought Zoom because we had WebEx Teams, and I can tell you that Zoom is much better to do this than with WebEx Teams because it's easier to create breakout rooms.
Sure.
But I agree with you, it would be even easier if one person could say, we make a breakout room with these 2 people.
I mean, I see you here, I want to talk about that other team. Yeah.
I think that would help, but
okay.
we were already, it also was start of COVID, so it was also a lot of experimenting for us. And we just realized we shouldn't use WebEx Teams. We should use Zoom because otherwise, I don't know how to do it. We tried it actually in other smaller workshops, and people, you can make a link to some other place, but you cannot summon them back. So then you're waiting in the general room for people coming back out breakout. Yeah, that's terrible. So at least with Zoom, that's better. Yeah, but I can imagine that the thing you're saying. Next challenge, make it engaging and energizing. Did someone have a similar? Yeah. So there are a lot of boring live events, right? Like this talk probably, and lots of others. But at least you have the opportunity to see each other's body language, do something about it, change the atmosphere, or maybe even the exercise. That's hard remote. So we figured we need to make it energizing so people keep being engaged, but also to have people basically contributing. So some things that we did, we try to make fun teams out of it. So one of the workshops had a Pac-Man team, which was the design of Georgiy. People were making drawings on the board, so at least that helped. To come back to your question, Jelmer, we usually, for people that are new, so also in the beginning here, we send a sandbox environment to ask them to try the tool, so in this case Miro. And at the beginning of the workshop, we do some energizer. So like what you see here, we ask them some question and they could make pictures or drawings or add stickies just to try the tool a bit. So they will not be like the super experts, but at least they knew how to make a sticky, how to copy it, how to make it smaller or bigger, which with developers, those people are usually quite handy. That was our target audience, right? So didn't need like a big training or something, but that's how we try to do it. And we had 1 or 2 small workshops before, so most people already joined one. But I certainly agree that it's important, especially with all this. I've seen like, I think half of this room in all kinds of meetups remote in Australia and wherever in the world because it's possible. And then your target audience usually, not all people have experience, and then it's important to do something with that. Question, Osran.
Thanks. I'm curious, people were at homes with the families. How you were ensured that they are really engaged during the session?
Yeah, so maybe something about Czech culture. So also here in the Netherlands, where I've done most of my work, if you ask people to put on the video, most people will do it. Czech Republic was kind of a different story. For one thing, if you are together with 90 people in a thing, have everyone be muted. Second, and that's actually more the practical facilitation, but I will answer it now. We almost had none discussions with the large group. So basically, or either me or the product owner or someone having some proposal was talking, and we let them basically give the input on the board. Have discussions in the breakout rooms, or, and I'll come back to some other example as well, have a small group separate instead of doing that together. But still, you need to have people engaged. So what we did was with most exercises, we let them do something. So either here, make a drawing, identify your challenges, summarize your results of this particular exercise. And then at least it moves faster.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a few more things. So we did some small breaks so people can address, some urgent things. Second one, so Zoom virtual backgrounds, or in other tools as well. So that helped a lot. So when someone popped with a virtual background, it went viral. So other people started turning camera on to try it, and it helps with privacy if you're concerned about privacy of your home. And the last one, to be like frank, the topic itself is so important for people, so they were engaged. It was not something someone told them to do. It's such a profound change for everyone that they obviously realize, that they need to figure it out. So that was a very important part.
Yeah. So this is actually another picture from the self-designing team workshop, but we had the start event before the first sprint planning with the new teams. And the CEO was there to introduce how important it was and that we didn't work with managers from that moment on. And he said, okay, after COVID, first thing we're going to do, which I would have done here, but we can't, is make a grill and barbecue all together. So which animal should we put on the grill? Which is for me kind of, as a vegetarian, hard, but at least it was fun and people liked it. So that kind of exercises, you have to put them in and enough breaks. Yeah, correct?
I just was thinking about the talk on YSoft last year at Munich, and I remember the physical energizer of Jürgen showing the hands out, this movement, and it was strangely one of the most memorable aspects of that presentation because of the funny aspect of the movement. Did you have any kind of physical movement in the online version that complemented the online experience?
Behind the camera, you mean?
I mean, like people would get up and do something physically, even though they, like if you think about some of the online games that kids play that have introduced the floss and other dances, they all do these dances even when they're by themselves. So I just was curious if you did something like that.
It actually, some sidestep. We didn't do it, so it might be good, but Jürgen actually gives training work together anywhere. and he has this wheel of fortune about which energizer to use, and usually this, make a picture of your feet because you're at home, and some people have bare feet, some people have like crazy things on there, or make a picture of yourself with the whatever, and show it to the camera, and then go like popcorn it to a few people to. So that we didn't do it, but actually it's a good idea, I think. It helps energizing.
Okay, thanks then. And then one other question that I had was a problem in the event generally in physical instantiation is that someone may not be able to come for some reason, but they need to find a team. So I know what I've done in that case in the physical world. I'm just curious if that problem occurred, and what did you do in the virtual version?
So maybe you're better to explain, because I think you
Yeah,
talked to that people in between.
We had one person who he knew he won't be able to join, so he kind of sent a deputy, the body of him, and he represented his opinion. So the engineers had enough time to actually prepare for that in advance. So that worked very well, and he advocated for that person.
We actually asked them very explicitly in advance to, if you cannot be there, make sure that your opinion, your input is there to a person you trust. Who is also one of the other participants. I think, yeah. Yeah, so I think what happened, I'm not sure, but I think what happened was they talked to someone who they want to be in the team with. So that he can represent in the same breakout room. But I'm not sure, actually. Maybe, yeah, it is. Yeah. So next challenge. So I was not supposed to have the pictures there already, but somehow it worked. Have everyone contributing? Is that something that has someone on there? Elmer? Yeah, a few people have. Yeah, so this is actually maybe an advantage of doing it remote. Not as much in depth, but what we did a lot was this technique that we just used with writing down the challenges. First, write down silently your thoughts. So this is actually one thing Miro and Mural should both implement, is just write it down for yourself and not show it yet until someone says yes. That would be a great feature, by the way, so people could at least read. But have them write it down, have them cluster it together. So this particular thing on the left was with 90 people, identify challenges, cluster and vote which ones are the most important. I think it took less than 15 minutes to do this. Well, with discussions or doing it in real life, it's really hard. So we have some vocal people, like everyone. So of those 13 teams, there are like the 5-6 usual people that give their opinion, right? So I think that's quite recognizable. Here, those people had the same voice as anyone else. So the more silent people with the good ideas were able to contribute. We also did this voting a lot. So on the right you see an example of the voting for the fixed team size, which was very interesting discussion. But what we actually did was, okay, give the arguments, read the arguments, vote for the top two, then vote again. That kind of techniques. So everyone could be involved. It's not like someone screaming the loudest, so we need to follow that, but really like more democratic, sort of democratic way. It was actually kind of obvious decision, so it was not that hard. So that kind of techniques we used a lot to do that, and have them identify, have them put it on the board team by team, read it silently instead of discussing it. That's also one that saves time, but also gives the opportunity for people to look at everything instead of taking out one or two things. And the last challenge that we discussing, so these slides are messed up, but having discussions and making decisions, somewhat similar challenges. So actually I explained this already, so mostly, but we did a lot of these vote thing. On the middle you see, after the last round that we did, the team that wasn't happy enough about the team, we said, okay, let's vote for the blocking concerns. And one was taken to a breakout room, most people went to a break. they discussed it there, tried to solve it, and moved on, instead of doing that with 90 people. Wouldn't have been as valuable, but it also would have taken much longer. Here you see the voting that I did again. And after each round, we actually did like this voting about how happy are you with that. So how we did that in full live versions was, are you happy, are you okay-ish, or not okay, go stand in one of the areas. We actually tried to simulate with like stickies and voting. A few success factors. Why do I say success factors? People were kind of happy with the outcome. Even some people said that it was better than doing it live because they felt more contributing. Also, after a while, people were still quite happy with the teams, or at least most people, which is always the case, I think. That no way that everyone is happy. But the first thing is high transparency. So if you do it like live, you could make things transparent, but people have to note down, while digitally it's easier. Everything was on the board from the last time, this time. You don't have always enough wall space. You see the issues, you see the challenges, you see the learnings from others. Also, I think it helped as well that the people that didn't have a team, that some teams really said, okay, let's do something. Fun side effect of this fixed team size, people were really cautious who to take in the team because they had a limit. I think you can simulate that differently, but that was at least a good effect. Yeah, so what we really did a lot is the preparation, especially the teams themselves. So in one of the 3 sites, they started already before we actually announced these workshops, but they knew it was coming, to talk with each other. So what would be good teams, what would be smart, and we try to encourage that by having like this good explanation of what we expect from them, but also Scrum Masters really talking with the teams, what do you need next time? But most of this was by the teams itself. Thomas?
In a previous session where I did self-selection, one of the behaviors that we saw in a not so mature environment is that there was this kindergarten-like behavior where I don't want you in my team, and come, we're going to steal that one from that team. And
Oh, well.
that is hard enough to tackle if you see it happening in real life. Did you have any kind of unwanted behavior that you witnessed, and how did you address that in the virtual one?
First, I'm thinking back about like the previous live self-designs that I did, which are 3. I don't think that happened. What happened this time, and this might be the case with these 2 people, so one of them actually, Scrum Masters were all surprised of, and the other one they sort of expected. But I don't know whether it was like childish behavior or whether it's, do you know? Can you?
It doesn't have to do with childish, but at least not from taking responsibility, but actually it's unwanted behavior, or it doesn't fit your culture by shutting someone out, or...
Yeah, so you can look at this 2 ways. So I said to head of product, this is the thing where you need to step in, because there's a reason that it's transparent that those people have no team, and there might be a deeper reason. So what would you like to do? That they just take people in the team while they don't want to? So I'm not sure that I can think more of than make it transparent, make sure that head of product and I think you mostly with some other Scrum Master talk to those people and to some teams to solve it. But we first 2 days, we did nothing and said, let's figure it out themselves first and then try to help them. I think that are most of the techniques that we used for this. So,
yeah. So I think that toxic behavior or something you don't want would be the hidden conflict, and the good behavior is open conflict. And I think we had it with one teams, where the conflict was around some people in a team didn't speak English like well, and if they get one person who doesn't speak, Czech, how that would work. But that was a very productive, good discussion, and team was able to resolve it. So I think it's a great thing. Probably you want to watch for, situation where something going on there, but it's hidden, and it would be probably harder to spot it in that setup So that's why, making this very transparent on a board, so we as facilitators were not able to join 13 parallel discussions. So from outcome of the board, you can spot when something is not good, and you can jump in and say, hey guys, like, do you want some support from us in resolving this? But I think teams like engineers did a great job, figuring this out.
That is actually my biggest takeout so far is having all those sub-processes all on the same board. That's really good, thanks.
So Miro had to buy some new servers.
Oh man, that's a super funny story. So if you want to hear what happened during this live event, join us in the open discussion we'll share.
Oh, Miro was out actually during this.
Yeah, it crashed during the break, and engineers came up with the brilliant workaround how to fix it. So stop by and we'll share with you.
Yeah.
Sorry, one more question. Were all the people divided themselves over the teams, or were there also roles involved working with the teams, aside of the Scrum Masters, that were sort of in the end state circling around the teams? For instance, if I look at my world, high capability engineers, for instance, that are only helping from around teams instead of actually being part of the teams?
Not that much. So two things happened. So we were already in the less adoption from the year before. So security people were already in the teams. Architects were not then, but already joining. So they were for the first time formally. So that were the new people. But they knew they would join the teams, and they already talked about it with teams. The only open discussion which was done was product marketing. Had some product managers that joined a lot of refinements and helping. And there was a discussion whether they should join the teams or stay in product marketing. And I think just before the first workshop, somehow product marketing said, it's not the right time to do that now. So otherwise that would have been one, but actually it wasn't. So basically it were all people already in teams, plus a few architects that were mostly already working with some teams a lot. So we didn't have that much. Yeah, so probably if we hadn't, in the first flip there was, I think even Jürgen was there in the room. He said, okay, either you're the manager of this all, or you're a team member, or you're the product owner, or you're a scrum master, otherwise please leave the room. And 3 people that didn't want to stay, but weren't going to teams, and he just waited.
Thanks.
But in this case, it wasn't really a point.
But also what helped here, you remember what was the optimization goal? That was like at the beginning clearly set, right? So teams reflected if their design helps to achieve this end-to-end delivery within the team. And we used, I think, some variation of team canvas to help team, again, reflect on different, aspects of the design. So not only technical, but, soft skills and others. So that was part of it.
So the last 3 points I'm going to do a bit quicker because of the time. So ability to give input, I think we discussed it quite a lot. So people constantly working on the board, adding stuff, clustering, voting. So I explained to use the future and past work to reflect on team design. So the overview of the product backlog, basically asking them to put near their teams what they were able to deliver or were willing and able to learn. So they could reflect on that. That was actually because we did it remote, but I think I even would do it again like in real life, at least with some similar optimization goal. Addressing blockers with a small group, we addressed, so not talk through it with 90 people, but with smaller groups, either during the meeting or outside the meeting, which made it much more effective, and also better outcome. So some things that we would like to try next time, and basically not next time in COVID times, but also next time when we could have it like real life, because we realized that some of these things might be very valuable also when we would do them like in real life. So especially when you have 3 sites and you have limited time where you have all the people together, because these sites are 200 kilometers apart, and you have 1 day, how can we optimize that day? And so a few things that we would like to try. One, this is a little bit less of the I just put it in there because I wanted to have 3. And then I added the 4th one, so actually it shouldn't be. We were figuring that the teams were preparing so well and discussing it so much, we could have just said, okay, figure out how to deliver as much value as possible to customers without saying end-to-end or anything, just because they did a great job preparing, so we could have given them more trust, I think. Smaller workshops for specific parts, which I will come back to in a minute, which ones, but like this challenges or this team size, if you would do that again, don't do that like on the real event, do that in advance, like in small workshops, because that actually gives input for the actual event. Next one is specific follow-up on identified learning areas. So we really made like, it's not here, but like on the big board, we made like for every team, based on all these product backlog items that you would be willing to learn and that you would be willing to deliver. What are the things that you want to learn, like on cross-functional thing or in different technologies or even other skills if you need. So you have more like this common learning direction. We didn't have the time in the second workshop because we had one more iteration than we expected. And in the start event, we did like a team canvas, and it was identified, but it wasn't facilitated that strictly, and that, so it was like more this open thing. So it wasn't the outcome that we would have hoped. So that would we do better next time, because this is the great opportunity. You have everyone together. You have a new event. Let's figure out what we're going to learn. You should always do that, but this is the great moment to do it. And because of all these discussions happening in advance, preparing. With 3 sites, so in that context, of course, to have the discussions on challenges and stuff on site, because the teams need to be co-located anyway. The biggest site had the most discussions, the most changes, so it would have saved time and effort, probably better outcome if we could have done some of these discussions just with the bigger site and with the other sites also, but separately. Would have been faster, probably. So the question is for the rest that couldn't hear, was there a mobility option for other sites to move to the other side, right? Only when they would structurally be there, because the constraint was co-located teams. So basically it was not discussed. So the people from the 2 smaller sites knew this is the group of people we have to deal with. Yeah. Do you want to say?
I mean, it's generally an option, so company supports that. So there are some people who move from site to site just to change the city they live. That's why it's kind of implicit already.
Yeah, so what would we do remote next time? And I will not dive into that deeply, but this identify the challenges we would do before the workshop. Do that remote if you have 3 sites, and then on the workshop itself you don't need to do it. The same as make sure that people understand the challenges and the perceived outcome of the optimization goal. Do that also in advance, so you can take that input to the workshop. If you would do that again, determine the fixed team size. And one thing we still argue about is probably depending on context. The first iteration of team self-design. So we used that to make sure everyone was there also, and is everyone participating. If we would have done that 1 week before, then basically people need to think about it and already discuss. Probably depending on your teams and how far you are and how good it's going, but you could do that before or just at the workshop itself. After the workshop, so we identified a lot of specific open actions which were much more specific because it was remote. Maybe have like a week later workshop with the people that volunteered to do some of those actions and see where we are there any blockers, and move on. It's fairly easy, just 1 hour. Now people were discussing all over. Instead of just 1 hour, make it transparent again, see where the blockers are and move on. That kind of thing's much more effective remotely. Yeah, so in the slides going to be shared, I think. So we put some links in the appendix about, we did some talks in some meetups about more deeply on facilitation. because we also did sprint plannings with all those teams, sprint reviews, overall retrospective, that kind of events we did with all those teams, and we basically gathered all the good learnings that we had on remote facilitation with large groups. Basically, a few things, I call it over-prepare, but like in a real workshop, you can easily adjust things. Basically, we had everything there on the board, and it takes some time, especially the first time, but it really is easier to have like really specific questions as evaluation, that kind of things, to do that really well. That really saves you time and makes it more effective. I call it draw before talk, but basically, first let people put something on the board, and then maybe discuss one or two things instead of having the discussion, because it makes it more effective. Handle and limit focal discussions, which might be the most interesting thing. So when you need to have a focal discussion, there are a few things that you can do. So first, prevent them as much as possible if you're with 90 people, but if you have to, make sure that you appoint specific people. So if I would like to hear it from team one, so team one, and call out some person, what is your answer to that? Or what is your biggest challenge, Johan? We didn't ask it actually, but then you know Johan would answer instead of, who can answer me? Then everyone will be silent with 90 people. If you ask something like that you want to hear from the group, say, who doesn't understand this exercise? Instead of who does everybody understand? Or who disagrees with this opinion? That kind of things you can do. Yeah, let people actively work. We discussed that a lot. So let people do things, add stuff to the board, cluster, talk to each other. Decision-making techniques. And technology is good. I don't want to dive into that because I think whole internet is full of that. But for sure, this kind of Zoom and probably even better ones, but especially things like Miro, Mural, yeah, those are your real lifesavers in remote times, I think, especially in this kind of workshops. Any other questions? I think we're right on time, so let's do one or two more.
Yeah, thanks for your talk. I have a question. You said the feedback was very positive. They like it even better. I still assume if you would, in retrospect, have the chance to do it on-site, you would do it on-site. Why? What were the things that didn't work as well?
So one of the things that is harder to grab is these discussions in the breakout rooms. So we basically gave them rounds of, I think, 45 minutes, but something like that, to discuss what's your next round, figure out how you can help other teams or some kind of specific exercise. And switching between those rooms or coming in like halfway is really hard. Well, in real life you can see where's the discussion going, who's taking notes, who isn't. So that breakout and with the smaller groups, I think would be much more effective. I think that's the main thing, and otherwise I need to think about it and I'll let you know. Last one, and then...
Thank you. Short question. Did you as a facilitators use any back channels to communicate, except on the Zoom, with the group, with the smaller teams? And
yeah, we had a chat with the Scrum Masters together to, okay, don't forget this, or yeah, on the side, basically 2 screens. Yeah, that helps. Don't forget this, or hey, someone asked that, go back to that, and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, so thank you, and have fun next time.